everybody out there, this is Seto, and today for you guys, we are going back in time in Yu-Gi-Oh! History to 2004, when Chaos Monsters roamed the Earth. No, not Chaos Dragons from 2012. No, I'm talking about the original Chaos. The bad guys named Blackluster Soldier, Envoy the Beginning, and Chaos Emperor Dragon, before he got the errata in Japan recently. So, I'm going to give you a little bit of history about this deck, and then we're going to do a deck profile on this deck. First off, yes, I know, this deck uses banned cards. That's because this deck is not supposed to be based in 2015 meta. No, it's not. This deck is based off the 2004 limited list. Back then, in 2004, when Chaos originally came out in Invasion of Chaos, there was no ban list. The ban list did not exist. We had something called the limited list. So there were cards like Regeki, limited to 1. Upon release in the TCG, Chaos Emperor Dragon, Chaos Blackluster Soldier, Envoy the Beginning were immediately limited to 1 because they were so powerful in the OCG that they immediately got limited when they came over here. So we had something called the limited list. The Chaos decks back then are actually probably the main reason that the ban list came out. After Ancient Sanctuary, I think it was, where agents were introduced, a set after IOC, Invasion of Chaos, the ban list dropped, banning things like BLS, Chaos Emperor Dragon, Delinquent Duo. Just a whole bunch of these good cards that you're going to see in this deck got limited, or banned, or just a whole bunch or semi-limited in this deck. This deck was really the first most powerful deck in the game of Yu-Gi-Oh! Before Chaos and Invasion of Chaos came out, the main type of decks you saw if you went to a regionals or your locals was beatdown, where pretty much you had big, 19 beat stick monsters, Mechanical Chaser, the Gemini Elf Twins, whatever. You also saw Clown Control, which was not, Blade Clown, which is, in the OCG right now, but no, Clown Control using things like Dream Clown and Class Clown and things of that nature, which was a way to combat, beatdown. And then you saw decks like Deck Out type of decks and, Burn type of decks and a whole bunch of other decks, but Chaos was the prime deck. And when it hit, it literally lasted for 2-3 years. It took about 2 to 3 years for Chaos to fully get out of the Yu-Gi-Oh! System, because even after this got hit, you had to deal with DMOC, and DMOC was still a Chaos type of thing. Then you saw Chaos Sorcerer got used. Chaos Sorcerer in Invasion of Chaos was a common that was never used until Frog Monarchs came out, and Monarchs came out, and people said, "Oh, this is a good card now since BLS and Dark Chaos Emperor Dragon are banned." So I'll go over the deck now. I apologize, I just wanted to give you guys a little bit of history lesson on Chaos. Like I said, this deck is pretty much based off the limited list of 2004. So, first off, we have the two big daddies here. We have, well, she's a female, by the way, but we have Blackluster Soldier, Envoy the Beginning, and we have Chaos Emperor Dragon. Also, I should note, some of these cards that you're going to see in this deck are actually based on the original holo rarities that they came out in. Forgive me for BLS because I never owned one. But we have Chaos Emperor Dragon and BLS. Not a lot of people back then ran DMOC because DMOC was considered too slow back then, actually, believe it or not. And these two were the main cards you wanted to get to. You wanted to fill your grave up as quickly as possible and get to these cards, either one of these cards very quickly, and just win the duel. Usually, whoever got to one of these cards in the Chaos mat, if you were in a, I'm going to tell you from personal experience because I played back then. But depending upon, who got to their Chaos monster first, if it was a, I guess you say you're facing another Chaos deck, usually won the duel. And there were different variations of Chaos, but this deck in particular, guys, is more of Chaos Control variant. You had Turbo Chaos, you had just Chaos, and then you had kind of like Control Chaos, and this variation is Control Chaos. So next we have the two generic searchers from back then in the day. These two were both limited to 1 back then. We have Witch of the Black Forest and Sangan. These two cards could search out pretty much anything in your entire deck, really, for the most part. Just about anything they can search out. Plus, they were 2 dark targets, so they were also Chaos fodder. too good of a card not to run. Then we run some standalone 1 monsters that were limited to 1 at the time. We have 1 Blackluster, excuse me, not Blackluster, 1 Breaker the Magical Warrior, 1 Yatagarasu, 1 Tribe Infecting Virus. We have Magical Scientist, and we have Sinister Serpent. Let me try to get those all better in the camera, guys. So we have these guys right here. We have Breaker, Yata, Tribe Infecting Virus, Magical Scientist, and Sinister Serpent, which is from the original rarity it originally came out of. So Breaker was considered one of the best standalone monsters back then. Amazing card. Yata, usually you would either have Chaos Emperor Dragon on board, then you have a Sangan with Witch of the Black Forest on board, and then you would activate Chaos Emperor Dragon's effect, blow up the field, search out Yata, normal summon the Yata, and then just poke them and get them into the Yata lock. But there were other ways you could get into the Yata lock because this was a control variation. Tribe Infecting Virus, just a good card. It was kind of like a little mini Regeki. Sinister Serpent you can constantly use for Tribe Infecting Viruses attack. If they Dewinkle and duoed you, confiscation you, whatever. It was just a good card. It always gave you defensive measures. Just always having that monster in hand was actually kind of a good thing, even though some people nowadays may not see the advantage of it. Magical Scientist. This was something that was somewhat used in some Chaos decks and not used in others. I used it because at the time he was limited to 1, and it gives me a reason to run the extra deck. But pretty much he can just help bring out big beaters to force the thing. He's also a dark target, so do keep in mind you have dark and dark for Breaker in them, because you run a lot of darks and lights in this deck. So Magical Scientist just gave you other options for the deck. You don't always have to run it in Chaos 2004, but it's useful. So let us go now to some of the other cards that came out. So at the time, we had these 2 cards out. We had DD Warrior Lady and Kaiku the Ghost Destroyer. So why am I running these 2 cards at 2 of? Usually DD Warrior Lady got banished, so it didn't really count as a light target in your graveyard, but sometimes, depending upon the situation, it would just go to your graveyard. Say they confiscationed you, whatever. Kaiku and DD Warrior Lady. So DD Warrior Lady came out in Invasion of Chaos, and was an answer to big monsters or, Jinzo. Whatever your opponent had on the board, it was an out to it. You just pay a little bit of life points, ram into it, and kill that monster. So if they had Jinzo, DD Warrior Lady, get rid of that. Kaiku was good in the mirror match. Just like I said before, whoever got to their Chaos monster in the mirror match usually won the duel, but not always. Most of the time that was the case. Kaiku helped you in the mirror match immensely and was actually main deck. So if you remember how Kaiku and Spellbooks worked in 2013 when we were in Dragon Ruler format, that's kind of the same reason you ran Kaiku back in Chaos. It locked out your opponent's graveyard. So it made them not be able to banish for their Chaos monsters or use things like Premature Burial, Monster Reborn, whatever. It helped out in that respect. Call the Haunted as well. It locked your opponent out of their graveyard, meaning they couldn't use their big Chaos monsters as long as this was on board. So that's why you ran it. Plus, on top of that, it's an 18 beat stick, which is respectable from back then. Also, it's a dark target as well. That's always something you have to keep in mind when you build the Chaos from back then. Is it a dark? Is it a light? That means extra things to you. Then we run 1 Shining Angel. It's a light target. It's a floater. Some people didn't run this card. I like running it because I can get to my DD Warrior Lady even though I had Rhoda. This is a light target. It's a little bit faster, and cards that float back then were a little bit better. So we run that for that reason. Then we run 2 Magician of Faith. I think, if I remember correctly, forgive me, it's been a while since I looked at the limited list before I did this deck profile. I think you actually, back then, Magician of Faith was at 3 or 2. I can't remember. But you definitely could run 2 of back then. I think it was 2 or 3. I can't remember on the limited list. But back then, Magician of Faith was such a powerful card. So first off, it's a light attribute. Yep, get to your Chaos fodder. Second, you can reuse all your freaking powerful spells. Pot of Greed, whatever. There's so many powerful spells in the deck. Such a good card back then. 3 of got really cloggy and slow, but 2 of is an amazing combo. Then we run the last monster, which is Reflect Bounder. This was a card that some people ran and some people didn't back then. It was a debatable card. A lot of the time it was a Tekken, and I like it as a Tekken too. One of my friends from back in the day actually ran Reflect Bounder. Pretty much he can help, you know, inflict damage to your opponent. It's a light attribute. It's a 1,700 attack, which is nice. But so it's a card that came out of Invasion of Chaos, just like DD Warrior Lady, and it was a card that some people ran and some people didn't in Chaos variations. I like it. It's come in handy sometimes, playing against GOAT format decks, which is the main opponents I faced. Then we have some draw cards, which I'm going to talk about right here. So these cards you may not think off the top of your head, hey, these are not draw cards, but it's a turbo variation of Chaos. Like I said, it's a control turbo variation. So we have Pot of Greed, standard in any deck from that era. Graceful Charity, standard from any deck of that era. Graceful Charity in this deck is just like it kind of is in Dark Worlds to some extent. Because the fact is, oh, I got some lights and dark in graveyards, I drew into a Chaos monster. Let me just send some light and dark fodder to the graveyard so I can get my Chaos monster out just that fastly. Painful Choice, it's just like Graceful Charity in this deck. You just send your lights and darks to the graveyard that much more quickly to set up for your Chaos monsters. At the same time, you're thinning your deck out getting to your Chaos monster. Mirage of Nightmare works in combination with MST. So this was a good little way back in the day. Some people liked it, some people think it's inconsistent, but it worked out to some extent. You would go Mirage of Nightmare, then activate MST, so you wouldn't have to discard your cards from hand and you just draw like 3 or 4 cards off Mirage of Nightmare. A good little combo. Same thing with discard all for Painful Choice and Graceful Charity, same kind of concept. Send lights and darks to your graveyard as quickly as you can. Thin through your deck to get to your Chaos monsters. That's the name of the game there. So that's all your draw power. You know, discard all, Mirage of Nightmare, Painful Choice, Pot, and Graceful. So those are all your draw cards. Then you have kind of your back row destruction, which is Heavy Storm, which was at 1 at the time. Harpy's Feather Duster, which was at 1 at the time. And MST, which, believe it or not, was actually at 3 at the time. After the ban list of 2004, Mystical Space Typhoon got limited to 1 and stayed at 1 for a long time. But Heavy, Harpy, MST works with, like I said, Mirage of Nightmare. When you're summoning your Chaos monster, you didn't want it to get destroyed by back row, so MST and Harpy's Feather Duster could help against that. And I apologize, guys, if you hear any thunder in the background. There's a big thunderstorm right behind me. So next we have the control element aspect of the deck. You have some cards here. These are what I consider the control element of the deck. Next to Yatagarasu as the monster. And also, guys, if you're subscribed to my channel, I just hope this lighting setup is working for you guys. This is a new lighting setup I'm doing because I just moved from my old house. I'm trying to find a good spot to do Yu-Gi-Oh! Deck profiles. So, yeah, I do apologize. So first off, we have the first edition Snatch and Steal from back in the day that I owned. This card is kind of a control aspect, very powerful card back then, just like it was when it came back off the ban list for a bit. Confiscation, a good card back then. Forceful Sentry, a good card back then. And Delinquent Duo, good card back then. One thing I'm going to say to you guys is, when you activate Delinquent Duo or Forceful Sentry or whatever, you know, these three mainly, try to make sure your opponent's discarded Sinister Serpent already, and it's in the graveyard. That way, you're not, you know, just giving them a plus off of it, which can be sometimes deadly. So just word to the wise. Then we have some spell cards. We have our destruction cards in Regeki and Dark Hole. Dark Hole and Regeki at the time back then were both limited to 1, so you have Regeki and Dark Hole. Two good powerful spells here. Usually what you would do sometimes is Regeki and Dark Hole, summon your big monsters and just run over your opponent. After the ban list of 2004, those two got banned. Then you have your Monster Reborn and your Premature Burial. These cards were both limited to 1 at the time. You could bring back if they MST'd your Premature Burial. Sometimes what you could use Premature Burial for is, you would bring back your Chaos monster, bring back a Sangan or Yatagarasu, clear their board, maybe with the Harpies, MST, or whatever, their back row. And that was another way you could bring back Yata and just poke them. So even if you discarded Yata, you know, or whatever, you had these cards here, including also Call the Haunted, to bring back the Yata and create a Yata lock. still. So it was very deadly back then. Also, I should mention that back in 2004, and same goes for people that like playing scapegoat format, priority was in effect. So if you don't know what priority is, go look it up. That means pretty much when the monster hits the field, it takes priority. Just in layman's terms, I guess you could say that's how it works. Then we have Ring of Destruction. This is before the errata, so your opponent would take the damage before you take it. I think that's how the old Ring of it's been a long time since I've read the old text for Ring of Destruction, but I believe that's how it works. Please forgive me if I'm wrong. Then we have Call the Haunted, which was limited to 1 at the time. Mirror Force back then was such a powerful card. It was limited to 1 at the time. Torrential Tribute was limited to 1 at the time. Also, we have this good old bat card from back in the day, Imperial Order. Imperial Order pretty much said no to all your opponent's spells and was a very, very, very powerful card at the time. And you could turn it off whenever you wanted to. So that is all for the main deck. On to the extra deck, which was pretty much used for Magical Scientist. We have 3,000 Eyes Restrict. This card was out at the time. No, this is not scapegoat format. I know people were like, probably saw the BLS and the Chaos Emperor Dragon and the Thousand Eyes Restrict and were like, this is a scapegoat format deck. No, it's not. This is 2004 Chaos. So this was a card you could bring out. It could help get around problematic cards out on the field. Then we have, how do you pronounce this card name? Dark Bader the Terrible. Now, also I should mention about the extra deck back then. At this time, including scapegoat format, the extra deck was unlimited. Means, what does that mean? You could run as many extra deck cards as you wanted to, but I'm only running the main ones that I seem to use when I use Magical Scientist effect. And from what I can remember, some of the cards that I used to use back then, after talking to some of my old school friends from back in the day who I've gotten recent contact with. So, Dark Bader the Terrible, this was a good card. This could stop spells and stuff back then. Ryu Kenshi was an amazing card back then. This card could pretty much say no to normal trap cards, I think, and normal trap cards and spell cards that targeted him. So, very good card. So so far we got 2 Ryu Kenshi. I know I've been going through that fast. 2 Dark Bader, 3,000 Eyes. Then we have the Fiend Skull Dragon and 1 Dark Flare Dragon, which it was a dark target, so sometimes it could come in handy for chaos fodder and whatnot. So Dark Fiend Skull Dragon, a pretty decent good card, a very good card from back then, and we also have Dark Flare Dragon. So guys, I hope you all actually enjoyed this deck profile of my Chaos 2004 deck. I'll talk a little bit more now. I know I went very fastly through that deck, but I mean, I know people are going to say to me, if you haven't watched this video, I know people are going to dislike it because they're like, oh, I remember playing back then and it was a horrible format. Yeah, I'm not saying it was a great format, guys. I'm not saying that 2004 Chaos was a great format and that's why I built this deck. No, that is not the reason why. But I did play through this format. I was playing Yu-Gi-Oh! At the time. And me and my friends actually back then, and as you notice, some of these cards have like kind of the old kind of like style of artwork. They're a little bit darker. That's because these cards are actually from that time period. They're not from the reprints or anything. And I played back then with my buddies, and me and my buddies, my group of friends, who we formed a team back then, including my brother, we actually kind of pooled our cards together to build this deck. And my main responsibility back then for card pool, for playing the cards, so we had maybe one guy that was in charge of monsters, one guy that was in charge of expensive spells and traps, and my main focus was expensive traps and spells. So a lot of the spells you see from back then, like the first edition Snatch and Steal, was what card I even used in the Chaos decks that me and my buddies built back then. But like I said, I built this deck for nostalgia and nothing more. And plus it's fun to go play, some old school formats just for fun and reminiscing. So that's the main reason I built this. And plus I'm building a scapegoat format deck. So if you enjoy this, guys, I would highly suggest checking out my channel and looking for the scapegoat format deck, or just checking out my channel in general, because I really love old school Yu-Gi-Oh! And this is just one reason I wanted to build this deck, is for fun. So guys, till next time, take care, have fun dueling, good luck dueling, and I'll see all of you guys next time. Seto Kaiba, I'm out of you guys till next time, and good luck dueling to you all, and go have fun playing whatever Yu-Gi-Oh format, old school Yu-Gi-Oh format that you used to play in. Go have some fun playing it. Take care, everybody. Seto Kaiba, I'm out of you guys.